Welcome back to the Placeholder Podcast, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz. Got a great show for you today. We're smack in the middle of the Vuelta a España. There's been a little supermarket sweep. A little supermarket sweep. We've got late-breaking Renault Tour news. Is that true, Kit?
No.
Yes, Kit. Just say yes.
Breaking news. Yes.
Say yes.
Okay.
And Joe Lindsey's going to join us later in the show to talk about hacking your Di2 and whether this is actually something we should care about or whether this is just strange academic exercise. Joining me today, as we just heard, Kit Nicholson. Welcome.
Hello.
And Jonny Long. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Let's get straight into the Vuelta a España. Kit, maybe we could start off with, I don't know, bring the listeners up to speed as quickly as you possibly can.
Oh my goodness. Well,
who's currently winning the Vuelta? What's been going on?
Okay, so in layman's terms, who is currently winning the Vuelta, who is currently ahead, is Ben O'Connor. Been in the red jersey since stage 6 when he went on a classic breakaway rampage, but he took a vast amount of time, and the GC contenders have since then been catching up. But what's been great about the Vuelta from a GC perspective is that it seems to be a matter of a different person every day is the strongest. And whether that's Roglic, who takes a, bombastic win atop a steep climb where he likes to, that's his playground, or Enric Mas out-climbing everyone on a first cat, subsequently having a mishap on a descent. But anyway, we've got a handful of riders who are jostling for position near the top of the standings, and the top 10 has looked different nearly every day when the roads have gone uphill, shuffling around underneath the first and second place. So yeah, it's from a GC perspective, we have a race, and there are 2 weeks left with a whole ton of climbing still to go. It's looking good. One thing that is a big story though is that it's been bloody hot. The heat followed the race from Portugal and into Spain and into the mountains. 38, 39, 40 degrees Celsius.
Is it not centigrade?
Centigrade.
Wait, I've been writing centigrade in my stories all week.
Centigrade.
Which one is
the
it?
same thing?
Is Celsius the plural of centigrade or something?
I don't know, Johnny. We should know this. We're just both going to sound stupid now.
The dictionary says it's another term for Celsius. I think we're okay.
This wouldn't be a problem if we all just used the same temperatures.
Hey, I feel like I'm pretty good about translating out of Fahrenheit.
Well, just finish off the weather situation.
Yes,
they have just had a rest day at time of speaking, and I'm not going to talk about the stages that have come after it because they haven't finished yet. But what is notable is that the temperature has dropped by about 10 degrees because the whole race upped sticks and travelled almost 1,000 kilometres on the first rest day. So yes, the Vuelta is in session.
Johnny, you just wrote a story about this, actually. Well, I can't imagine that the reception was all that great to a 1,000-kilometer transfer.
So the first thing which Kit told me about and then I looked into was the fact that after Sunday stage, they finished at Granada and Adam Yates crossed the finish line at 5:31 p.m. local time. And by 6:30 p.m., he sat on a bus to get to the airport for the chartered flight. And in the communique, it said you have to be sat there.
And it's not a team bus. These were coaches because the team buses were already en route.
Yeah, with a police escort. Yeah. All the big trucks had already left to travel 1,000 kilometers northwest. But so that's fine for Adam Yates, even though he would have had to do like interviews, podium. But the last 3 riders across the line, which included Brandon Rivera for Ineos and a couple of others, they finished. And when they would have stopped their Garmins, they had 16 minutes to get from finish line to bus seats. And obviously, if you wanted a shower, there was a shower 200 meters away from the finish line in a hotel, which you could go and use. But it's probably not physically possible to do that in 16 minutes. So then that was a very long flight for whoever was sat next to them.
Well, so they had to drop their bikes, presumably with a leftover van with a mechanic, or probably just the one, maybe a Swanee, to give them a bottle of ice water. Do you think there were some riders in mechanics vans on a long trek, or did the plane wait? I just like the image. I'm not actually asking a serious question.
Yeah.
But the idea that you've got 16 minutes.
I was thinking about chasing that down.
You've got 3 minutes to hand your bike over and get a drink. And then what do? You put your trackies on over your chamois?
Yeah, I didn't quite have enough time today to contact and report enough on and I was also thinking if I'm texting press officers who've been standing in 40 degrees a week, they are going to hate our bullshit even more than than regular. But yeah, I won't just read out the whole story. There's also been talk, because of the heat and because of the transfer, of switching the route around to have gone north out of Lisbon and do this like Galician bit, and then like leave it like 10 days for the south to cool off a bit to make it more manageable. But I did check the forecast, and it's just hot all the time down there at the minute. I think there's been some storms, and it's August. It's August and early
Spain.
September. Like that's what it is.
There's a reason that most of mainland Europe takes this month off completely.
Exactly. Well, but then the other thing, I'm trying to remember an article I wrote like 2 hours ago. This is bad. I need to probably go see someone. Was the fact that they're doing this 1,000-kilometer journey, all the caravan, media, everyone. But as has been pointed out to me by people on the ground there, this Vuelta, they didn't print out physical road books because of the carbon footprint.
Amazing.
And people are there. And so then what's happening is that reporters obviously just going and printing their own ones, because if you're stuck at the top of a mountain, you're not going to have phone signal, and then you're not going to know where to go. So it's just like insane. It's just all insane, always.
And the carbon footprint of printing books versus the carbon footprint of sending people 1,000 kilometers across Spain.
Well, and then driving to a print shop to then go print your own one and not getting it done in a batch, which is probably more efficient. I don't know. We don't need to get into
amazing.
The print business.
1,000 kilometers, that's like 13, 14 hours of driving.
So for people who were in regular cars, it was like 9 hours of like fast driving. There was no traffic. So then that meant if you were on like driving a team bus or like an ice truck, a kitchen truck, and a mechanic truck, there's so many extra trucks these days. Like it's not just like team bus, race car, and then you've got race cars, feed cars, scout cars.
I like the image of the caravan traveling that distance.
Yeah. Do you reckon the people had to still be on top checking stuff out, or do you think they got to go inside? Like, if there's the cherry from the Tour de France that you have, it's like a quad bike with a like paper mache cherry on top. Is that dude really? Sure, they've got like trucks, don't they, to take, and lorries to take them.
Yeah, they put them on the back of. They put them on the back of big flatbeds. To return to the heat real quick, Mike Woods did tell our beloved colleague Andrew Hood, right, that the heat protocol should have been activated already, which there's a number of different ways that can actually happen. They can shorten stages, they can do all kinds of stuff. Why wasn't it? What's the follow-up on that?
Well, so it looked organised. There was an image, and I'm sorry, I don't know what stage it was from, but it was from one of the very hot stages last week, when there were fire trucks hosing the road and hosing the riders. That looked like, so somebody had to make a call to make that happen. So there was some sort of, I don't know, mitigation made. But yeah, I suppose that there's something to be, I think there's some of our Australian friends would say, yeah, but come race the Tour Down Under, guys. It's bloody hot then as well. Yeah, I
did a race back in the day called Tulsa Tough, is in Oklahoma in the middle of summer. And as you can imagine, it was very, very warm. And the best part of it was that on the thing called Crybaby Hill every lap, they were like just big parties on either side, and everyone would come out with super soakers, and you just go through and just get blasted in the face every time. And it's actually quite effective as a cooling mechanism. So, a fire truck on the side of the road.
Well, yeah, Giulio Ciccone was loving it. The picture of the peloton coming through, and Giulio Ciccone's just opening his arms to the heavens and just his mouth open. It's great.
Actually, you know what we have? We have the rest day with Jack Haig, which Jack filed this earlier this week. Couple conversations with other riders that are actually at the Vuelta with him, and obviously he just experienced this transfer on his own. It's a great set of interviews, and I think all of you should head over and subscribe to the Rest Day with Jack Haig anyway. But let's just drop in a couple minutes of that chat into today's episode.
One of the biggest factors so far in this Vuelta was how people managed the heat.
Yeah.
So another thing that we actually have been doing to help manage the heat is we have a cooling protocol, which we use after the stage. So finish the stage, see the soigneur after the finish line, normally tip a bottle of water over my head because I'm really hot and the water's nice and cold. Then we go back to the bus, and then the soigneurs have a big esky full of water and ice and towels inside. And then basically we just get a beach towel that's wet and cold, put it on top of us to try and cool down the core body temperature as fast as possible. Yeah.
No, I think it's been really good. And I think a lot of the other teams have made fun of us because we had so much water and stuff on the finish line. Like we have this big trolley full of water, huh?
Yeah, it's become quite trendy. Now that I'm a father, I see a lot of other families, and you have like these big collapsible trolleys that families always use when they go to the beach. Basically, the Swanias have this for us, but it's full of water and ice.
No, and then was 3 days ago,
Yeah.
when Arensman collapsed.
Yeah,
it was
on the stage.
Yeah, it was actually our doctor and our Swanee who gave him water and ice and got him to the shadow. And
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of the stage, I think Timon from Ineos was struggling quite a bit, probably with some symptoms of heat stroke, and our doctor was there, and our Swanias had all the ice and water and stuff there and helped cool him down before he could get some medical assistance.
yeah.
Speaking of debates about heat, there's also been the debate, which is fun to talk about, even though it's never going to come to any sort of fruition, I imagine, is should the Giro and Vuelta swap? Because every year at the Giro, there are questions about whether weather is going to prevent them from going over a mountain pass. And quite often it does make sense. It's cooler in Italy at this time of year. It can be very, very warm, but it's more consistently cooler. And in Spain, you wouldn't have issues of snow stopping you from, except maybe if they do a Pyrenean stage, but then it's still
I'm thinking about it. I'm like, actually, in my head, this sort of the logical, okay, well, if you swap them, you've always got this problem in the Dolomites and Alps where they have to cancel stages or alter stages because of snow. So obviously, move that race to August, September. That makes perfect sense. But I'm pretty sure the Pyrenees are also still quite snowy.
Yeah.
In May, right? Like, I don't actually think it would solve that problem. It would maybe only solve the heat problem.
I think if you look at the percentage of the race in Spain that would ever be affected by snow, and the percentage of the race in Italy that might be, then it would be completely different. Almost 2% of the scale.
What do you think is the main reason why it would never happen? Because the Giro doesn't want to give up its spot?
I think that's the problem. Cycling. I think if all three were owned by the same entity, they'd swap them.
Yeah.
But like RCS has no interest in giving ASO
anything,
a premium, first Grand Tour of the year slot, right? Like it would just never happen. Because as we all see, like that, there's no question that interest in the Vuelta it unfortunately does. It drops a little bit, right? Like there's a bit of bike racing fatigue. So the Giro has no interest in putting itself in that position on purpose.
Why don't we just do the COVID thing where then they get moved back to like October? Well, that was kind of fun.
Right. Yeah. Put it 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
Didn't we have Vuelta and Giro stages on the same day?
Yeah, we did. They overlapped by a weekend, I think.
Was there like a Super Sunday as well? A Super Sunday where there was also something else on? There was.
I've often wondered if as the Earth gets hotter and we sort of run into this more and more often, right? If we end up with sort of a midsummer break of some sort, right? Like a post Tour de France. Maybe the Tour moves to the middle of June. It moves 2 weeks earlier. And we get this post Tour de France kind of, middle of July to September, almost like full on break from bike racing. Like other sports do this, right? Other sports, not only do they have seasons on and off, but like F1 is the obvious one where they just have sort of a break, like a big old break right in the middle, a couple weeks break right in the middle of it.
Football breaks.
Football, a little bit. Yeah, I can't imagine it ever actually happening unless there was some sort of like really serious collective action from the riders or something like that, because the organizers, they have no real interest in
changing things, more work,
stuff around that way, and changing anything.
It's going to be hard.
To return to the racing a little bit, as you said, Kit, it's a poised GC at this point in time. How many riders do we have within sort of shooting distance?
What's interesting is, O'Connor's time gap after his stage win was almost 5 minutes to Roglic, and at the end of the weekend it was almost 4 minutes, so it's 3:45 or something. He'd taken back 4 seconds after losing a minute and a bit the day before. But Roglic is in second, but between Roglic and the 10th overall it's only a minute and a half, something like that anyway. And so it is really close, and the top 10 will keep shifting until there are big mountain stages and somebody falls out, or it's behind. And we should point out, it's not like Ben O'Connor is, with all due respect, Guillaume Martin, who might have got into a breakaway, taken 10 minutes, worn the red jersey for a week and then finished in 17th. Ben O'Connor has been fourth at a Grand Tour twice. He can ride his bike quite well.
Serious contender.
He's a serious contender.
Yeah.
He's aiming for the podium, and he's, definitely showing that he's on the way. So it's not like Roglic is the virtual leader or kind of the leader in waiting, like we sometimes have at this point in the Vuelta. But yeah, it's the fact that everyone is so close means that we don't know. There is
I
no
wrote in the
knowing at this
newsletter
point.
on Monday about how O'Connor is now like the bookie's favourite. He's like 2-1 and Roglic is 3-1. Which when I saw that I was like, okay, like because they always know what's going on, don't they? Like you want to know who's going to win X, Y, Z. Which
I would still say I would still put Roglic as the favorite personally.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking because it's like Ben O'Connor is good, but if he cracked on like a super hard mountain day, then you just lose
Roglic
minutes.
would go all
you
in.
lose
Yeah,
minutes.
Stage 20 is 5,000 meters of climbing, uphill finish. It is horrible. And then the day after that is a time trial, which Roglic is going to take time out of O'Connor on, right? So I think O'Connor will hang on for a while, for quite a long time, and maybe even until those last two stages. But I have to see Roglic overhauling him at some point.
Also, it's not like O'Connor could lose a jersey and I think take it back necessarily. I think it's one of those ones where either you're strong enough to keep it and hold the advantage, or unfortunately that's it. Just more like physical and mental, I think.
Yeah, I mean, O'Connor has had a weak moment on the stage 8 finale where Roglic won his second stage of the Vuelta, and then Roglic had a bad day the following day. Certainly on the final climb, he looked like he was struggling, and O'Connor seemed to consider accelerating and trying to put Roglic in more trouble, but then he just let Felix Gall set the pace, which is probably the right thing to do if you don't know that you're going to, his pedigree isn't quite that of Roglic, who, if the roles were reversed, he would go flying off, and he's got a little bit more consistency in those sorts of repeated efforts. But leaving aside what Roglic keeps saying about his back still hurting, you don't know whether that's true or that's spin, but he is coming back from an injury. So there is a little bit of doubt there, and he may, and we don't know if he's going to last the 3 weeks, whereas O'Connor is coming into this as he would have hoped he would, without setbacks behind him.
And apparently Sepp Kuss is better if he races the Tour first.
Apparently so.
And the Giro before that,
And the Giro before that. So the only way you can ever come back and win the Vuelta again is if he races all three.
We should, before we move on from the Vuelta, we should mention Enric Mas, who the commentators were saying he's the best Mas we've seen in a long time, which is true. But I think he's never stopped being good at riding up a hill.
Is he more Mas than ever?
But he is more Mas than ever, apparently. But he's looking. I mean, on Sunday he looked like the better climber out of the GC group by quite a long way. It's just a shame he can't descend very well.
How happy is Dane going to be that we're all seemingly genuinely enjoying the Vuelta? I've got a theory that it's because we've had so much sport this summer that it's like a gently like weaning ourselves off. Tour, Olympics, Tour, we needed something to fill that gap. And so the Vuelta, it's just there and it's good, so all about it.
And we both decided we hate football now, Johnny. So
yeah,
can't be turned to that.
Yeah, so true.
Or was that Ronan? Ronan hates football.
I think all
anyway,
of us.
we should move on from the Vuelta. There's a lot of Vuelta yet to go. We'll have 2 more shows where we get to talk Vuelta. It's a cracking final week. I'll tell you that. I was looking at the route preview,
bonkers.
And those last couple days are absolutely bonkers. So anything could happen. The gaps right now could be turned totally on their head. Adam Yates could move up another pile of places. Anything could happen. So make sure you're watching. Make sure you're tuning in. Let's head to a supermarket. The little supermarket sweep. What happened?
Well, there was a little bike race in. Well, it's not. Okay, let me start that again because it was actually an accidental
That
pun.
was accidental.
Yeah, I'm an idiot.
No, you gotta keep that. Gotta keep that.
Keep that. And the embarrassment
really
straight
stupid.
after.
So, over in Germany, little bike race. Boom, boom. So 5 stages, a time trial, a couple of sprints, and a couple of slightly hillier, but more or less, slightly harder sprints. And Little Trek obviously had to take a stellar team to a race that they share, with whom they share a sponsor, and they basically got the job done. Mads Pedersen won 2 stages. Jonathan Malland won 3, if I've got that the right way around. Yep, I have.
Yeah.
And Pedersen also took away the overall. So a supermarket sweep for Little Trek at the Little Deutschland Tour.
I say literally the only reason why we mentioned this is because we
It's
thought it was funny.
too
The
good.
little one, all the little stages.
Well, and because last week should have been a week dominated by Car 4 hosting that Vuelta stage start.
I mean,
But then
yeah,
Lidl must
it'll
have got
literally
wind
held
of
their
that.
beer.
Then, well, especially in Germany with, they then decided to sponsor the Deutschland Tour, which I think got underway the same day that Vuelta stage was. So it's all, I mean, Intermarché, they've got caught lacking here. What are they doing?
Yeah,
Supermarket battles.
Yeah.
Should we head over to the Renouy Tour? Renouy Tour?
I don't know.
Renouy Tour?
Renouy?
Renouy Tour.
What is
Enica
a
is a big
Renouy?
bank.
Does anyone know?
It's something
Is
about waste management, I think.
Ah, yes.
If it's not, then
so
that's
it's
a really
the
random
so it's the
bit of
Belgian
information.
mafia, then, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a waste. I can't believe I knew that. That's really sad. It's literally a waste management company.
I mean, it sounds kind of like renewables. That makes sense.
That is true.
Or something.
It's a shame it's not like the waste management tour in golf in America, because that could get on board with. And Belgium, you feel, could kind of do that for the Renouy Tour. Might give it a bit more spice.
Waste Management they used to sponsor a cycling team
Did they?
in the US. Anyway, Renouy Tour. What are we talking about? Why are we bringing this up?
It's the
this random race.
most amusing World Tour race of the season. It's like a nostalgia tour for the classics in August.
Amusing, you mean in terms
Explain
of
yourself.
why is it happening?
Yeah, funny in a kind of not funny ha-ha sort of way. It's just funny as in
Well, I
weird.
imagine imagine the people of the Benelux region absolutely love it, but I think for
Yeah.
everyone else, it's that meme of someone going, "Why?"
So explain for the uninitiated out there. Explain what this is. This is basically like cobbles in August.
It's a 5-stage bike race with a couple of very classic style stages, including stage 5, which finishes at Gerardsbergen. But they've got a time trial of 2 because, of course, you have to have a time trial in a stage race. But yeah, it's in the Benelux. It's very, very flat mostly.
Do
I
they
think
do
we
the
did-
Golden Kilometre still?
I think so. Yeah,
Because
they're
that
not
was
flat,
like
aren't
the one fun bit about it, wasn't it? You just
Yeah.
have like random
like-
huge dude just taking 10 seconds out of the rest of the field.
they? Yeah, it reminds me of on motorways where you get the average speed limit. Johnny,
Yeah.
the average speed limit tests.
Yeah.
But I think this isn't really as interesting as maybe we hoped it would be. But I did some maths, and
Don't
Yeah.
admit to that on the podcast.
I was going to say,
Kit.
I was going to try and lead in Kit being like, but I set a challenge that I forgot about, and
Okay.
thankfully you did
Well,
the
let's try
homework
that.
will
Let's
give
try
us
that way around
give
then.
us some perspective on the vibrant universe of bike racing. There we go. I could
Yeah.
sell anything.
Well done. Okay, so 5 stages at the Renouy Tour. They do 4,505 meters of climbing, which is less than they do on stage 20 at the Vuelta, I think. So there
There's
you
your
go.
fact of the day.
Huh.
A whole 5 days less climbing than 1 day at the Vuelta.
That is good stat. That's good stat, Kit. Enjoyed it.
I hope the maths
Thank you
was right.
for mathing.
It's actually genuinely the other reason why this is an interesting race and why it's one that maybe listeners out there should keep an eye on is it's kind of a worlds tune-up, pretty good worlds
Mhm.
tune-up. So there's a whole bunch of pretty big names there that are tuning up for worlds.
Speaking of tuning up for worlds, are you excited to next week talk about the Tour of Britain, Caley? Big riders
not
coming there.
particularly.
Wout van Aert's going. He's gonna ride
Not
past.
massively.
Wout van Aert's going.
Yeah,
He's at
he
the
is,
Vuelta,
isn't he?
mate. He's at the Vuelta.
Oh, who am I thinking of that's going?
Evenepoel.
Sorry. Oh, the other one.
Evenepoel's
Yeah,
making his debut.
that's
at,
it. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Sorry. It's Evenepoel and Pidcock's, not Wout van Aert. It's because they've still got the
Pidcock.
picture of
Well,
Wout van Aert on the website, which is, I think that could probably get them up in front of the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK, really, if I was being picky. But yeah.
Evenepoel versus Pidcock. I mean, that's a nice idea, but
That's
it's
a
really
good
just going to be the Evenepoel show, isn't it?
Wow, that's not very
All
chapeau
due
of you,
respect to
Kit.
Pidcock, but
Come on.
I mean,
Anyway,
Have you guys looked at the world scores?
I honestly
ages
haven't.
ago.
I have to keep, every time I think of
The
Worlds, I
Zurich
have
World
to take
Course?
30 seconds to remember where it is. It's in Switzerland,
It's
isn't
kind
it?
of epic, actually.
Yeah?
Yeah, so it's in Switzerland, and it's just sort of a string of punchy climbs. So that's why, like I said, we've got riders training for it at the Renouy Tour. I would imagine that as is often the case, the world champ comes out of the Vuelta. That's like, I
Yeah,
forget
or
exactly what the
I
stat
think-
was, but it's a quite high percentage.
Hershey is lining himself up to be a favourite.
Yeah.
He took his
Oh,
second World
absolutely.
Tour win in I don't know, a month this weekend.
Absolutely.
And he's bouncing back after some unhappy years. So that would be a real turn up for the books at Tudor, wouldn't it? They get the world champion and a previous world champion. They would definitely go to the Tour de France next year if that's the case.
Think about how many
100%.
bad puns there will be if Hershey wins the Worlds.
Oh.
So many.
No chocolate medal for Mark Hershey. Let's take a quick break. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to change tack here a little bit. We got an interesting story for you. Well, I'll set it up, and then Jonny, I'm going to throw over to you. So, what do I need to know about Ethiopian Terhas Teklehaimanot?
What we need to know about, well, there's a lot to know, and I'll try not to go on for too long. It's a story that popped up in the British press because Terhas is an Ethiopian cyclist, won a gold medal at the African Continental Championships. She's now living in the UK in London, claimed asylum because all sorts of stuff going on in Ethiopia, like military action, and I'm not gonna like pretend that I know anything about that. Anyway, she's in London and got an invite to be on the UCI refugee team for the upcoming World Championships, what we were just talking about in Switzerland. The only problem is she needs an asylum interview to like decide whether she can actually go, because obviously if you've claimed asylum somewhere and then leaving, like it's obviously a special case, right? You're not getting many people who are like champion cyclists who then also are forced to flee where they're living. So they're trying to drum up some like awareness to hopefully try and fast track it. Like we won't go into like how the British system and everything and the queues and backlogs and stuff like that. But anyway, they're trying to fast track that.
It's not an easy time to try and seek asylum in the UK, basically.
No. And she's been living in like it sounds quite a bad sort of accommodation. Like she's been quite outspoken in like the food you get very little money to like exist on, but at the same time like she's training 5 to 6 hours a day and has been supported by a refugee charity and supported by Team Africa Rising, who I believe we've sort of collaborated with on stories before. Ian has knows those guys quite well. So I guess at this point we've got to hope that things get sorted out, because it's a pretty incredible story to go from having to like flee your home to then living somewhere you don't know and still training that much to then make it to the World Championships. And I think it's just it's a rare sort of good thing that these sorts of big political cycling machinations have, where there's an actual refugee team that they're like, we're going to try and get you to the World Championships.
I was just going to say, credit where credit is due. We've obviously, I mean, even just last week, Ronan was railing against the UCI and radios and things like that. This is actually it's one area where they are doing relatively well, or at least it appears that they're doing relatively well. I mean, when Ian pulled back the curtain on the UCI evacuations out of Afghanistan when the Taliban came into power, there was definitely questions to be asked, and UCI's handling of that afterward, and et cetera, et cetera. So you always hope that there's not something that we haven't uncovered yet, but on its face, this certainly is a great program. It's the UCI's World Cycling Center has been doing like really truly excellent work for a very long time, and it is to me it's sort of like this is what governing bodies should be doing, and the problem is that they start to just want more and more power and more money, and they start to chase things that are not what they should be doing. But like really down at its core, like this is what these bodies are for, is for growing the sport, in any way that they can, and helping people participate in the sport who may not be able to otherwise. And I guess a little hat tip to a little chapeau.
Well, I mean, success stories include Binyam Girmay and the sisters from Afghanistan who played a part in the Olympic Games road race, the Hashimi sisters. And the Hashimi sisters are still at the World Cycling Center. And Girmay raced with them at the beginning of his career. So yeah, they are doing something right. If
you're wondering about Terhas Teklehaimanot, the surname, not related to Daniel, as far as I can find out. It's probably a common name, and I found out about the surname. It's derived from the name of an Ethiopian monk and saint who was called Tekla, first name, Haimanot, second name, who existed from 1215. It says here 1215 to 1313, which would make Tekla 98 years old in the 13th century, which is
that's incredible.
Which is wild. So I'm not gonna stand too firmly on that date. God, this is the problem with the internet now, is you can't just Google things and then you get the answer. Damn it. He maybe is maybe that's why he was a saint, is because he had such patience to live 98 years in the 13th century. Must have been pretty bad.
Well, yeah, let's keep an eye on this. I think further stories on the UCI's efforts in these areas are warranted, if only for a sense of balance on us mostly telling them that they do a terrible job in other ways. Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on this particular story, and we'll keep an eye on whether Terhas is able to get to Worlds. Shifting gears here just for a moment, pun fully intended. Joe Lindsey, welcome to the show.
Lovely to be here.
Joe, we brought you on to talk about Di2 hacking. So Shimano's electronic drivetrains and an academic paper that, well, showed that they could hack Di2 and, make other people's bikes shift and make them not shift and things like that. This sort of went around the sort of normal news cycle within cycling media. You took a closer look at this, though. First of all, give me a bit of the backstory, and then what are the takeaways here? Like, do I, as a person who rides Di2 on my road bike, actually have to care about anybody hacking my bicycle?
No, you do not.
Oh, good. Okay.
If you are not a pro racer, this is not something that you need to be worried about in terms of your own personal safety on this for your bike. What was interesting to me is the kind of signal that this sends about where the future of cycling may go with this kind of stuff. So to back up, this popped up at a very highly respected computer security conference where two researchers, one from Northeastern University, along with a grad student there, and one from University of California, San Diego, published a paper and presented at this conference that basically they'd found a way to hack into the Di2 system and figure out how to make it shift outside the rider's control. This is something like, you remember back when SRAM first released ETAB back in 2016. There were all kinds of questions about, what about crosstalk, somebody shifting and it affecting your trailer, or could you be hacked, or all that kind of stuff. And all of that kind of stuff. I remember people
saying that if you rode underneath power lines, you might shift.
Right,
and that
whatever.
That
do you need to put a tinfoil hat on your access trailer, that kind of thing. And none of that ever came to pass. And the reason that it never came to pass is because, as one of the sources for my story, Keith Wakeham, said, the bike industry has always operated on security through obscurity. We're just too small to matter to hackers. Like, they're going around stealing, like, no wireless communication system can ever be made fully secure. But hackers and malicious actors, thieves, that kind of thing, were focused on stuff that was much higher value, like I can steal the code from your garage door opener, or the key fob for your car, or that kind of thing. Like, stuff that's like immediate tangible value. Like, what's the value in hacking somebody's drivetrain to make them misshift? There was none. So it fell to researchers to figure out how to actually do this. And the upshot of that is that, yes, it's Shimano Di2, but there's no specific reason to think that SRAM, for example, is invulnerable to this. They just haven't done it yet.
It sounds like a high-tech, futuristic version of throwing thumbtacks across the road. Just something
very much.
Completely pointless and annoying.
The question is whether or not, in this case, like, who's throwing the thumbtacks? And like the researchers sort of pointed out immediately that, in a high stakes environment like the Tour de France, where multi-million-dollar team sponsorships turn on results, that, teams could potentially be involved. And that is a possibility, but this exploit is still technically difficult enough that it's really only available to people with some resources. My supposition is that the more likely way that this would go, if it ever did happen, which of course, again, it has not. This has just been demonstrated by some researchers. But if it ever did happen, the number one group of people that I would think would be involved would be professional gamblers, who could basically like make prop bets of a kind. And this is the scenario I explored in the lead to my story, is like, if you could force Mathieu van der Poel's drivetrain to misshift on the Carrefour de l'Arbre, then you could make a prop bet that says Mathieu van der Poel is not only going to lose Paris-Roubaix, but he will be dropped on the Carrefour de l'Arbre. Then you place that prop bet wager at like 10 different sports books, and then the next day just go collect your winnings after having sat there and like beep, beep, boop, and caused him to misshift.
I like the idea that you could bet on when well, it's not a nice idea, but like it's like betting on when like what round a boxer would go down in, but just like very. That's odd, yeah.
How exactly does it work?
So this is.
We don't need to like give people the recipe.
Right. No, I don't think there's anything there because like what they had to do basically is analyze the wireless system to figure out what the communication protocol was. So in any wireless shifting system, there's basically 3 wireless radios, one of which is for Bluetooth, and that connects to the app to do things like adjust, your features and push firmware updates. One of them is Ant Plus, which basically gets the signal from stuff like your, what gear you're in, and is how like SRAM, for instance, delivers you updates on you need to do maintenance on your drivetrain. The third one is the one that we're talking about. These are proprietary wireless communication protocols. SRAM actually got an FCC license for theirs, and they're low power wireless that does nothing but control the shifting signals between the paired derailleurs and the shifters. And so what happens here is even though that signal is encrypted, if you have a radio, what's called a software-defined radio, which you can configure it to pick up any signal, that signal is being transmitted over the air. So if you're close enough to the bike, you can grab the signal of one upshift and one downshift that captures the entire signal, including the encryption, and then you can spoof it back to the derailleur. You can send a fake shift signal back to the derailleur that the derailleur recognizes as legitimate. You have to be in close enough range, which is about 10 meters or less. So this is like, and if you were trying to capture the signal in a whole pack of riders, you wouldn't be able to do it because you have to be able to figure out like which bike do I want to capture. So this is all about the sort of the logistical difficulty of the exploit that like you'd literally have to go. And again, this is the scenario that I sort of painted in my lead. It's like you'd have to go and capture the signal from that person's bike in an isolated scenario, like on a training ride or in the mechanic's work stand the day before a race when the mechanic is shifting through the drivetrain. You could capture it then and then resend it the next day. And so that's how this hack works.
So if we see like, man in Borat suit running with a box with some wires and antennas coming out of it, we know exactly what's going on. If you see a guy with a satellite dish on his head, that's a problem. That's your number one clue. But that's the thing is like both the researchers and Keith Wakeham told me that even though the setup that they used for this was pretty clunky, it's large, it's attached to a laptop and that kind of thing, you could, once you capture the signal especially, you could configure even like an AirTag with a remote that would send signal. So you could drop it in a rider's jersey pocket and they just like press a blip on their handlebar and cause somebody else's bikes to miss shift. Right.
So
did the researchers explain why they bothered to look into this?
Yes. So again, this is where we're the security through obscurity thing. Like we don't matter. I asked these guys, and Dr. Fernandez, one of the professors, told me he was basically like, the whole reason we did is because I'm a cyclist and I was interested in whether or not it was possible. So that's
totally valid.
If Dr. Erlentz Fernandez had been a trail runner, maybe we'd all be none the wiser right now.
I mean, it's something I've always wondered about. And you don't put humans do crazy, terrible things sometimes. You don't really put anything past people, particularly as you say, in sort of like a gambling context where there's potentially significant cash to be made. So let's say I am worried about this. Let's say I'm deeply concerned. Is Shimano doing anything about it?
Yeah. So these guys, again, this is not a black hat hacker situation. As soon as the researchers figured out this vulnerability, they contacted Shimano and started working with them on a fix. And so at some point this summer, I don't know when, but at some point, Shimano pushed a firmware update to its pro team partners to fix the problem. And that firmware update is also being pushed to everyday owners fairly soon, from what I'm told. And then SRAM, of course, has not been hacked yet. So that's something where, and they say that their system is much more impervious to this because of some of the technical ways that it works. The big thing for me that I take away from this is less that like somebody could, hack your drivetrain or your wireless suspension, your flight attendant, which runs on the same protocol as Access, and somehow cause it to malfunction. But it's the idea that bicycles today are sort of increasingly connected devices. And so they introduce vulnerabilities to other parts of our lives. The apps that we use to update these systems are run on Bluetooth, which is notoriously unreliable for security. There are all kinds of exploits, old and new, being discovered every day for Bluetooth. These apps store some of our personal information, including location data, gender, things like that. We have already seen, Shimano last year was the victim of a ransomware attack that did not compromise any of this stuff, but compromised its internal computer systems. 4 years ago, Garmin was the target of a ransomware attack that specifically took down Garmin Connect and bricked the whole thing for all users until it was either fixed or Garmin paid the ransom. We're not sure yet, which they never said. This is the environment that we live in today. We tune our drivetrains via apps on our phone. We download stuff to Strava or Garmin Connect or that kind of thing. These are vulnerabilities that exist that people can exploit, and that's just something that people have to try to remember. You want to be as smart as you possibly can about your own sort of digital hygiene, but there's a limit to what any of us can do if somebody hacks the company itself, as they have with Garmin and Shimano.
Well, my mechanical drivetrains, I feel very safe.
Rim brakes. Don't forget the rim brakes.
Mechanical drivetrain. I usually forget my Garmin or Wahoo at home, and so I'm all good. Good to go. All right. Thanks, Joe, for the update. I think we're going to take another quick break and then come back with a little trick or treat. Ooh la la. All right, we're gonna return to an old little game that we had, or a segment. Not really a game. Anyway, it's we haven't used it in a while. It's called Trick or Treat. And the request is basically that one or more of us come armed with a trick or a treat. Just something that happened in the last week that was a treat or a trick. So, Kit, you've got one for us this week.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is a treat. It's vaguely amusing. Ever since
vaguely amusing is really what we go for most of the time.
Yeah. It's our bread and butter. So ever since stage 11 of the Tour de France, in fact, when Grisha Nierman was coaching Jonas Vingegaard to catch up to Tadej Pogacar on a stage he subsequently won, I have caught myself doing much the same to my puppy who refuses to walk on our morning constitutionals. So I will say, come on, but since that day in July, I've been saying, come on,
That's great.
Yeah, and it makes me smile when I'm trying to coax a 10-month-old puppy along the pavement in the wind, which he hates.
Do you catch yourself like every morning?
Well, I'll be honest, it's died down a little bit. But yeah, I now every time I say come on, I'm reminded of Grisha Nierman, basically. Yeah.
I've got a request. While you're walking your dog and speaking to him and Grisha Nierman, you should wear like a Visma vest and hold out a bottle for your dog.
With sweaty armpits?
Optional.
That's a bit of a
dealer's choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Squirt
fun.
him.
That's
Get him going.
Do you find yourself someone that's susceptible to like taking on accents or words from like things you're watching on telly or people you're hanging out with?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely am.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned this to you guys before the show, but I came back from the Tour de France saying Garbo, which is definitely an Ianism.
That must be Ian.
And my wife is like, it drives her absolutely up the wall because like every trip I go on, I come back with some new turn of phrase that I did not previously use, and I don't actually even realize it. Right, like at least Kit, you had the sort of self-awareness to realize what you were doing.
Well, I wasn't just putting on an accent; I was adding a whole word.
That's true. Yeah, but like Garbo is not a word that I have ever used in my life, and frankly, like in U.S. English and American English is not really a word at all. But you just pick these things up. I think a lot of us are like that.
Yeah. Including Adam Yates, stage winner of Sunday.
Yes, that interview was a bit crazy.
I'd noticed it before. Yeah, I've noticed it before with him. But he's obviously he's an English lad, but I've noticed that he now speaks like somebody for whom English is their second language. Or at least someone.
That's not an insult to be clear.
No.
That's not
someone
an insult.
within cycling.
Like
so
the tonal,
his turns
tonal
of phrase,
and vocabulary. Yeah.
Yeah. The way that the words that he uses and the syntax and the classic kind of sensations or the overuse of the word super.
I also, in terms of like tone and intonation and like clarity and things like that, I find, so I had a friend who worked for a European based bicycle brand and worked in Switzerland and spoke in this sort of very lilty, like you're trying to you're speaking English to somebody who it's not their first language, and so you're trying to speak it very, very like clearly, and so you end up speaking kind of differently than you would if you're speaking to another native speaker. There's a little bit less kind of slang, there's a little bit less, you like structure your sentences a bit more clearly. Yeah, exactly. And so I pick up on that with Yates. In fact, I pick up on, I think you can pick up on it with a lot of the native English speaking riders who live in Andorra or live in Girona or something like that, and they just spend so much time, particularly I think the ones with like non-native English speaking partners, which is not, Adam Yates is not in that category. But you just sort of get this. I think anybody who's heard it knows exactly what I can't really actually
YouTube it,
replicate it, unfortunately.
Yeah. But it's particularly noticeable with some. I mean, not speaking specifically about native English speakers, but it's another good example is when you see someone, say from Belgium, who's racing on an Italian team, or vice versa, or so Alberto Bettiol's English accent is not an Italian English accent. It's or who else? I don't know. I can't think of anyone in particular. But you get people we've all heard a French accent in the movies. Quite often, you'll get this really sort of odd mishmash of accents in a cyclist who is speaking English speaking a second language on a team where they all speak a different language from each other, and it's this fun kind of I don't know. I guess you learn English from whoever you're surrounded by, and if they're not English speakers, then it's going to be an odd hybrid language.
A slight tangent, which will be brief. On this topic, there's a Belgian footballer of Senegalese descent called Amadou Onana, who now plays for my team, Aston Villa. And he's lived in Belgium since he was 11, speaks like 5 languages. But there was an interview a couple months ago where he's speaking fluent French, obviously. And then an English reporter interrupts to answer a question, but calls him the wrong Onana. So calls him Andre instead of Amadou. And like that, Amadou switches and uses like a proper like London accent to like call him out on like, you don't even know who I am. So YouTube also, a couple of YouTube recommendations now this show. A YouTube Amadou Onana interview. It's just like, it's amazing. And that's sort of what we're talking about. Because these guys, like, I don't know how cyclists, sports people, anyone gets their head around all of these languages.
I'm always so impressed by how many languages some of those riders speak. But yet they're in a bubble. They have their own lexicon, and it's so it's only natural that they'd pick up certain things, and a bit of press education too, bit of management of how you speak.
You know how in TV shows and movies in the future, like Star Trek, now we're kind of getting into After Dark territory here, but we'll just keep going anyway.
Close.
You know how they like everybody speaks the same language, right?
Yeah.
Like there's just like a universal language. I've often wondered if we're sort of headed that direction because the Earth is so global now, and like at least in the Western part of it, quote unquote Western part of it, English has become the language of business and the language of like most of Western Europe. You can find English pretty much everywhere. And over time, over decades and decades and decades, does that just start to turn itself into this new language? And I'm not saying English is the universal language 100 years from now, but is there some sort of like I don't know. We should get a linguist on to maybe answer this question. Where does everybody sound like Adam Yates in 100 years? Is basically what I'm saying. We had this sort of like weird amalgamation of like English speaking with other turns of phrase with like this sort of need for clarity and whatever else.
I'm gonna call back to sometimes it has been referred to as a degree in QI studies, i.e. I don't know, any British listeners might know the brilliant TV show QI. You always pick up some fantastic nuggets, and at least once a week I will churn out something in conversation that I learned from that show. But this is something I did learn from this show, and I think what you're saying, Caley, is probably got a little bit. I mean, I'm sure you are aware. You won't be surprised that it's you've got bias, Western bias, English speaking bias. If you took it statistically now, if there was an international language, possibly more likely
Indian.
Spanish.
Oh,
and rather like we're saying, there are versions of English where there are different, even garbo, different words that kind of translate but don't really.
Spanish, I need you saying garbo
Portuguese
as a text message ringtone.
But yeah, the various versions of Spanish and cousins of that language, and it's spoken all over the world. And I believe if this fact is correct, which could be for one of two reasons: I've misremembered it, or QI got it wrong, or a third reason, it's changed since
It's
then, but
changed, yeah.
can't have changed that. But at the time, I'm pretty sure that the answer to
Spanish.
this question back in the day was that Spanish, if you took it now and looked at the statistics, Spanish would win as the international
Easier
language.
than Mandarin. Or there's that Apple TV show called Sunny with Karen Filippelli from the US office, and they have little AirPod things because she's an American woman living in Japan, and there's little tiny AirPods that you can't see, and they just translate languages for you straight away
Yeah, that's
in real
that's
time.
AI.
That would be cool.
Gulp.
I would like that.
It's coming.
I don't like that.
It's coming.
But the languages kit, imagine you can just go and chat to anyone.
Yeah,
Anyway.
suppose.
Should we do our new test segment? Should we test run our new segment that we're gonna
Yeah.
use in the off season? Should we do it in After Dark so that we can?
Let's do it in After Dark.
So then we can
Well,
not
let's
expose
tease
it
it.
to. Okay. Oh yeah, give the
Okay,
question
we're-
and then we'll do the answers in. God, Kaylee, you've got this media
So
biz sorted.
So the question is, and this will be, we'll do this in After Dark today. If you, I mean, everybody knows what Mount Rushmore is. I think even non-Americans know what Mount Rushmore is. Most of them. It's become a bit of a cultural thing.
I've also stolen this segment from another podcast, so no claims on originality.
Yeah, all the best ones are.
Yeah.
It's like if you were going to replace Mount Rushmore instead of a bunch of old white dudes from early America into something else relevant to cycling, for example, or more specifically, in this case, I think what would be the Mount Rushmore of the Vuelta a España, the Col de Rushmas, the Col de Rushmore, I don't know. what would it be? What would the four things be? And with that, we're going to head to After Dark and you're going to get our answers.
Bye-bye.
All right. It's time to wrap up. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Placeholder Podcast. Although, should we
what?
just tease the name again? No.
No.
We've been promising this
No,
for
you can't.
weeks.
No more.
At some point, it'll change. It'll just change. It'll just change on you. Like that. When you know it hit you. All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks
ya.
for listening.